So good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for coming to join us for this panel discussion on photojournalism from Vietnam to Gaza. My name is Ron Haviv. I'm one of the co-founders along with Gary Knight of the VII Foundation, and we're very pleased to be able to continue our educational series. So we'll have another panel tomorrow, actually two panels tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, in conjunction with the OFF Festival, we have a presentation on USA 3.0. And tomorrow afternoon here, we have a conversation about environmentalism and photography. So it is an honor for me to be sitting here with Patrick Chauvel and to have online from London, Nicole Tung, and from Qatar, Belal Khaled, who I will do some brief biographies before they speak. But I'll just talk a little bit about this idea, why I came up with this idea for this conversation. And it's kind of basically because even though at the foundation, we have educated more than 1,000 visual journalists in the last few years, there are many more people out there that are amazing photographers or coming into the world of photography, but don't really have a sense of history, a sense of understanding about what happened before them, why they're doing what they're doing today, things that have failed in the past, things that have succeeded in the past, things that would enable them to be better visual journalists. So this conversation is addressing the fact that trying to bridge this gap, offering historical context and offering insight to the traditions that have shaped war photography over the course of the last 50 years. So by exploring major conflicts from the 1970s to the present, we're going to examine what made past visual journalism effective and what lessons remain relevant today. So starting with kind of not the beginning of photography and war, but in terms of contemporary photography and war, beginning with the Vietnam War, things changed dramatically with that conflict. And for the first time, journalists had unrestricted access to the battlefield, capturing unfiltered images that exposed the brutal realities of war, and that these photographs didn't just document history, but they also helped shape it by fueling often anti-war sentiment in the United States and other countries around the world, and influencing public perception worldwide. In response, governments often began exposing stricter media controls in later conflicts, fearing the power of unfiltered war photography. So we're gonna start. We're lucky enough to have Patrick with us, who essentially could do this whole conversation on his own, having done the work from Vietnam till today. And Patrick started work at the age of 17, is that correct? Starting in Vietnam, he's covered more than 20 conflicts over the last 50 years. He's survived a number of serious wounds and is an inspiration to, certainly to myself, but many of us, for his ability to continue working, continue wanting to have impact with his work. Patrick is also kind of a Renaissance man. Patrick is an author. Patrick is a famous actor. Patrick is a documentary filmmaker. And Patrick is also a visual journalist. And before I turn it over to Patrick, I want to just use two quotes from his TED Talk, which I think is very, very important. And one is, to fight war the right way, if you want peace, you have to know war. And he said that since 1968, he has had the impression of doing the same pictures over and over again. It's always the same thing. And I think the phrase or the initials SSDD, and I will leave it to you to kind of take it from there.
Yeah, that's what I put on my helmet, is SSDD, same shit, different day. I've added in Ukraine on the back of the helmet, don't shoot, it's me. I'm not sure it's going to work, but you know, you try all kinds of little things to keep going. a lot of things have changed since the Vietnam War. We're losing the confidence of the public, which was our only strength. The people would believe us. And the only strength of a reporter is that you trust us. If you don't trust us anymore, there's no use. And because of internet and all the images that come through internet and fake news thing that Trump started doing, people, have a hard time believing. They say maybe your picture is fake. Maybe you're working for this big politician. They don't trust us anymore like they used to. So I do a lot of conferences for young people in colleges and lycée and schools to try to show them that Ron Haviv, and people like that, they won't take all those risks to tell lies. We're fighting, the main victim of war, which is truth. We're trying to find the truth. And to prove that it's true, you need images or films or radio guys, and we're trying to do that. But if you don't believe us, it's no use. So this is one of the things that have changed. During the Vietnam War, every image that came to the United States or in Europe, people believed it. It changed the public opinion in the United States. I met this North Vietnamese photographer, and he showed me, he said, I'm going to give you a negative film that I never gave to the Vietnamese Communist Agency when I was working. He was a communist, he was a soldier and a photographer. He never gave this image to the agency because he knew that his government would not use it. And he said, I'm going to give it to you because I still don't know what to do with it. And it's a picture of a dead American pilot, a B-52 pilot, in the streets of Hanoi. He's dead. He's in perfect shape, but he's dead. And I said, why didn't you use it? Why would your government not use it? It's a victory. He said, no, it is a victory. We shot down this B-52. It was in 1972. But the American public was against the war and was having a little sympathy for the North Vietnamese. If you show them a dead American pilot, it's going to be the contrary. And that was, I tell you that story to show how they had understood how powerful photography was. It could change, and even if it was a victory, they were not using it to keep the public American opinion on their side. I'm not sure it would work today. People would say it's fake. And so he gave me that picture. I still have it. I still don't know what to do with it, actually. So, but there's the name of the pilot on his helmet, and I checked, and he's missing in action. But he's not. So I checked, I found his family, and there's a picture of a young woman with a baby in his wallet. I contacted the family, and so now he's killed in action. But they didn't know, and that was like 3 years ago. Wow. And so the picture did change the life of somebody. And then I said, can I meet his wife? And the baby must have 40 years old today. And his brother said that he didn't have a wife. So he knew this woman with a baby, but we don't know who the hell it is. So there's another mystery there. But anyway, what changed is now we have a hard time to publish pictures and a hard time having people believing us and finding money to do the stories.
But at that time when you were working, especially as a young photographer coming into play, spending all that time that you did, especially in Vietnam, do you feel like you were much more idealistic about the purpose of photography, that you had the ability to have more impact than you thought, or
when I arrived in Vietnam, I was 18, and I was just having fun. I mean, it was adventure. I was never going to be killed. I was the strongest man in the world. The soldiers were my age. We were traveling in helicopters, listening to music. But it changed. One day, I dropped my camera on the ground in the mud in the jungle, and there was a Vietnamese prisoner on the side, and I said, merde. And he said, you're French? And I said, yes. And he had studied in Paris. He was a communist commander. And we started talking. And he explained why he was fighting. I didn't like him, because his men had been shooting at me and at the Marines I was with for hours, and the Americans were my friends. But the way he explained the war and his reasons of fighting impressed me. So suddenly I was not so much friends with the Americans as much as before, because he complicated things, and I felt really lonely. I became a reporter. That was how I was born, as a reporter. You can't be too much friends on one side and not understand the other side. And it's this communist commissar that explained me that. He was my journalist school. And then, you can't go on doing this big adventure of living history, living all the main events of the world for yourself, because at the end you see a lot of people suffering, a lot of people that want you to tell their story, and they're ready to show and to cry in front of you and show the destruction. They trust you. So your personal feelings of liking the adventure or being sad, you have to put them on the side, because suddenly you have this responsibility. For me, a reporter it's the art of stepping aside. I am the guy who will listen, talk to, take pictures of, film, all that's coming out of those people to give it to you. I'm not supposed to be in between and showing my face. In French we say c'est l'art de l'effacement. It's the art of, I don't know how you say effacement in English, but people, well, yeah, vanishing, okay. I proposed once to the French agency I was working for, let's have the war reporters never sign the pictures. We don't need to be known by you guys. We need to be known by the newspaper editors, but they always know who's on the, who's there. And to have all a small, like a medium salary, whatever picture you do. And then it would take away a lot of guys that are not supposed to be where they are, because a lot of guys go to wars to put it on their business card, to become famous. And maybe they'll try to look for a fighting or fake a fighting to get more money, looking for the scoop. We're not supposed to do that. The scoop can happen. It's something that can happen, but you don't have to look for the scoop. You have just to look for the real story. Go to see the people, the civilians. Go inside the houses, talk to the people. Sometimes you talk to people for like half an hour and you don't take a picture. You get their story, you understand what's happening, you have to find the right distance. Now in Vietnam it was very easy because we had access to everything. Today it's getting more and more difficult. I mean, in Ukraine it took me like nearly 3 trips to get access to the front line, because they were being careful with the press, and it's a professional army, so they know what they're doing. You have lots of checkpoints on the way. And when you have a fixer, the fixer, he will lose his job as a fixer if he goes beyond the orders, so it's complicated. But in the same time, the fact that they're looking after us so closely, it's like a medal for us. That means that we are efficient. Why would they try to stop us working or try to kill us if we were not efficient? So we are efficient. But please believe us,
Do you think there's a point over the course of your career, some conflict where we started to lose the ability to have the impact that we wanted with our work?
Excuse me?
To lose the impact with the audience?
Well,
before fake news, do you think there was another moment where things started to change?
Well, you can see that it's a big business, the press. And when you work for Paris Match, after 2 publications, which is about 3 weeks on the ground, they'll tell you, come back, because we can't talk about Ukraine every week, and it costs a lot. And we have a show business story to show. And so, but the war hasn't stopped. And that's the problem. We would need to find a newspaper that's free, that finds money from elsewhere, so you could follow, Sudan, Yemen, some fighting in Africa that nobody talks about. But it's not sexy for Paris Match or newspapers. They can't talk about everything. And that's the problem. We can't. When I go to places like Ukraine, after 3 weeks, the newspaper will stop paying and I have no more money, and it costs. You have to have a fixture in Ukraine. You have to have a car. Maybe not a hotel if you get to the front line, but still, it costs money. I want to go on doing the story. So this is why we don't make much money, because once the newspaper has paid, with the money I made, I will stay 3 more weeks and spend all the money I just won. You know, and that's the problem. Finding money today is very complicated. We used to have agencies and lots of newspaper, and the agency was making money with the showbiz, with the publicity photo. There's Sigma was with the French agency I was working with. They had 25 photographers. 2 were covering war. All the rest were paying for that. It was show business. And so they could be in depth. So Sigma would send me, and once I was on the terrain in the country at war, they would call the newspapers and say, okay, he's there. And then you would get assignments from different newspapers, which permitted us to stay, like during the Iranian Revolution, I stayed a year without coming back. In Mozambique, I stayed a year. Now, today, you don't have agencies anymore. They'll take your pictures and sell them, but they won't send you. So we've lost our parents. I mean, we're on our own. So it's becoming a job for rich people, actually. You know, you need money to do this job. I remember saying to an American soldier in Afghanistan, he said, you must be really well paid to go with us in this shithole. And I said, no, I'm paying, friend. He said, oh, you're an idiot. You know, I said, yeah, maybe I am, yeah.
All right, well, on that note, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Patrick. And we'll have a Q&A afterwards where you can ask more questions of all the photographers. We'll move now to Nicole Tung. Nicole's an award-winning photographer who's worked extensively in the Middle East and in Ukraine. She's a contributing photographer to the VII Foundation. And welcome, Nicole.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm going to piggyback a little bit off what Patrick said, which is that I think nowadays we are really fighting to tell the truth. I started working in conflict zones during the Arab Spring in Egypt and then in Libya. And I think at that time it was really the start of, you know, the Facebook revolutions and social media making a really big impact on how the news and information was being disseminated. So at that time, you know, you could still, I think if we talk about the approach, especially in a place like Libya where there was no professional army, you could easily, you know, go in the back of a pickup truck and go to the front line every day if you wanted to. And that's what I think a lot of us did. It was incredibly dangerous. There was nowhere to hide on that very long road with no cover. And from there, I went to Syria. Also, that time was kind of in tandem with the, you know, use of social media by locals and civilians themselves. And so in some ways, we were kind of trying to parallel that as the international media and photographers going in there to tell the stories. I think the turning point for me was when we were in you know, in Syria, and you started to see a lot of foreign fighters going into places like Aleppo, and the local Free Syrian Army there were getting a lot more antsy and restrictive of photographers covering the front line. Not only because they didn't want us to be around the jihadists, but also because they didn't really see the point. And the war had been going on for more than a year. They could use social media quite adeptly, and they didn't see how anything was changing in their favor in the war, and that, you know, the pictures that we had all taken from 2011 to 2013 had not really helped them in terms of getting more support from the international community. So they kind of use that as like, you know, look, you're not as welcome here anymore. There was one bombing of an airstrike that I was photographing. It was a civilian neighborhood, and 20-something people had been killed, and there was this outrage at directed towards me and other photographers. There was only me and one other photographer there. And at this point, some of the civilians, out of their anger and of course their pain of that moment, started throwing rocks at us and telling us to fuck off because we weren't needed, nothing was changing, things were just getting worse. And so in some ways, I think that was, you start to understand that maybe the effectiveness and the impact that your images have is not really being transmitted, either around the world and certainly not being felt on the ground. And that brings us to Ukraine now, where the access, like Patrick said, is to the front line is very limited. It's only on the basis of you having military accreditation and also a fixer to organize with the dozens and dozens of brigades that are there. And that often takes time and it takes a lot of resources because the way you work is that you kind of wait around for a few days and then you go to the front line or to the town where there's a fighting going on, and you'll only go in for the day. If more, you might be lucky for 3 or 4 days, and now it's almost impossible because of the threat of drones. And it's really the number one threat now on the front line and also in these towns that are 15, 20, 30 kilometers from the actual front line themselves. So moving around is actually just so incredibly difficult. And you see what kind of propels all of this is technology. And so I normally when I'm working in Ukraine, I'm working on assignment with the New York Times. And of course, a publication like the New York Times has vast resources to support the work that we do for the weeks that we're there. And the way that we work is quite atypical to how I was used to working in places like Syria for, over 10 years, which is we would be in a team with a driver, a fixer, and a security advisor. I think security advisors became the norm during the war in Iraq especially for, TV crews that had the money to pay for it. It's now become the norm in a conflict like Ukraine, because of, the threats that a lot of the publications believed were there and also didn't want to take the risk of putting their journalists in harm's way. Typically, the security advisors who work with us are former military, and they, kind of provide us some insight into what's going on the front line, and what they advise is how to work on a story as safely as possible for the publications to mitigate, deaths and injuries, of course. So it's very different from, my 20s working in Libya when I was kind of running around without any real fallback except for other journalists and photographers who had the experience that I could rely on as well. So, that's kind of the trajectory that things have taken since I started working in conflicts in 2011.
I think it's also interesting. Aside from the changes you just mentioned, working with security, also your kind of time, especially during Arab Spring, kind of intersected with the ISIS PR machine and the kind of that also has. And for those of you that don't know, like ISIS obviously was very difficult, if not impossible, for most journalists to get access to. But they had their own media operation where they provided the media with unfortunately, execution videos and other things and so on. So they were represented in the media, and the media had nothing else to use. So they were often forced to use that type of material, and that kind of way of working seems to have been picked up by other combatants, whether in Ukraine and other places, where they're like, we'll hand out our own media. We have soldiers with GoPros. We have our own drone video and so on. So how do you deal, not specifically with ISIS, but when you're confronted with the military, let's say in Ukraine or even Syria or Iraq, saying we don't really need you anymore. We have our own way of telling the story. What options do we have as journalists to work against that, because we want to have an independent view of the story?
I think you have to, in those situations, you have to have a very good companion as your producer or fixer to basically convince them of why you need to be there to take the images. In Ukraine, for the most part, they understand why we can't take handouts. We explain that we're independent media, or that we don't just accept photographs from let's say press officers and things like that. And or sometimes it's just thinking out of the box when it comes to what other images you can include in to get this, to build a story and to tell the story of what's actually going on. And that isn't always to do with the military. A lot of times, of course, civilians are more accessible, and you try and build a rapport in villages and towns, and you try and tell the story that way. So it's really just thinking kind of differently. Sometimes you will always hit a wall when it comes to photographing something, and yeah, it's just about trying to find a different route around it.
And then, aside from the obvious logistical support and financial support of working with a partner like the New York Times, you also have the ability through their presence, their network, to reach many more people than most other publications. Can you think about times, especially in terms of Ukraine, where you've been able to, because of the New York Times and their reach and the journalism excellence that you and they are doing together, have been able to change the impact on the story, raising it to a level that you might not have been able to do as a freelancer, like you were, let's say, during Arab Spring?
Yeah, I think it's been quite interesting to see, the reach that a publication has. Sometimes on a very, kind of low level, people will grant you access than if you were, a freelancer working on your own. In some cases, it can be, it can work against you, because maybe the newspaper has published something that people didn't like, and, therefore they then turn against you. But usually that kind of opens doors, and they know the people, especially people in the military in Ukraine, know the impact and the reach of the New York Times. So they, allow you not necessarily better access when it comes to the front line, but they'll kind of entertain you a little bit more. And often that has to do with reasons of, well, we simply just need more weapons. And if you, tell the world that we're down to our last 10 shells, maybe that would help our unit get a little bit more funding or just more weapons. And so I think in the kind of mentality behind it is, yes, certainly there is a big reach for the people who this war obviously affects. But the stories that we've published as well, I've seen that I think, and this goes with any stories, that people for the most part have been very much on the side of Ukraine. And we've been doing a lot of stories about veterans and recovery and injuries, and I think people sympathize with that a lot, and they also kind of see the parallel to, let's say, American veterans returning home injured and whatnot, and they want to support causes like that. But again, that's not our role. It's if the individual people who read these stories want to do that. We're not here to advocate. We're here to just tell the stories.
And then going back to kind of the logistics of the way you're working, at least in Ukraine with the Times, with having kind of the full team, which is kind of been a little bit the antithesis of sort of the lone photographer wandering around on his or her own. I mean, was that hard to get used to? Is it harder to make kind of group decisions? And is it also, does everybody understand the needs of the visual, which is not often the same as the needs of the writer?
Yeah, I think the advantage of working with a team is that you have, actually more heads together than just yourself. And I think you have to play a good leadership role as well. Like if you don't have a cohesive team, then something's going wrong. So it's very necessary to be transparent about your ideas, and because you can't go roaming around by yourself as I would normally do. And sometimes it can be limiting in the sense that you just want to have a walk or a wander around, but that's just not always possible because of the circumstances, or because places are just not safe. um but you work around it, and I think having a team that I'm very close to is just makes all the difference. And working with a fantastic fixer also, who opens so many doors, and who also knows how to speak to people, not just to get access, but as a human, especially when we're at a site where something horrific has happened, or mass graves, or airstrike or sites that have been struck. That's really, you're dependent on your team for that. That's not just what I do. It's not, what I do is take photographs and on a bare minimum interact with people because of the language barrier, but it's the team around me who makes it all possible.
Great, thank you very much. And for our final guest, we have Belal Khaled. Belal is a Palestinian photographer and artist who's from Gaza, who has spent a great deal of time post October 7th working on the situation in Gaza. Welcome, Khaled. Welcome, Belal.
Hi, thank you very much for this chance. So basically, I'm gonna start on the October 7 when I was in Doha. I was in for some project here, an artistic project actually. When I opened the news in October 7 morning, and I saw the news, I realized that it's gonna be like a harsh war against like my people, against Gaza there. So immediately I booked my flight and I go direct in the same day. And all of my friends, they asked me, "Are you crazy? Why you going there? It's gonna be like a bloody war. It's gonna be too much." I told them, "Guys, I'm entered to the photojournalism to be in the ground, to be in the field, not to watch the news like public through like the newspaper or through the social media." Uh, so since the beginning of my coverage there in the war, unfortunately, we lose all of our offices as a journalist there, and we forced to work from like the cars. And from a tent, we set up it in hospitals and next to the schools, because we thought it's gonna be like a protection from like the airstrike, and also because we need a supplement like electric, like a water, like if we want to use something like a bathroom. Uh, so the work from like the field, it's more harder when you don't have like a good internet to upload your images, when you don't have like a disk just to sit it on it and make editing or do your job. It's very hard also when we enter to the first starving in Gaza in December 2023. We don't have like we just have like one meal through like the 1 or 2 days. We just have one meal, so we don't have energy actually to carry the camera or to carry it. To be a photojournalist in Gaza, actually, that's mean the photo you took it. Maybe it's gonna be the last one you took it, because the numbers of attacking against the journalists in Gaza, because we felt like um, we're doing a crimes when we carry the cameras or when we wearing the blue vest actually. Today we reach like 250 of Palestinian journalists. They are killed since the beginning of this war against Gaza, and this is a huge number. It didn't happen in the whole countries around the world. So we became a thread actually in the ground. So daily when we going to cover some areas, the people, they are scared of us. They said, go out from here, like, because they're gonna attack you any moment, and you like making a threat on us. So it's making like a huge load in you, and making you like, should I go to cover the massacre or the airstrike there, or should I like sitting in the hospital, or sitting in the car waiting just to someone who taking the photos and making edited or something like this. Also, in that days, we stay far away from our families, because and a lot of journalists, they killed in their houses with their families. So we felt like if we're going to the houses, to our houses there, maybe like they're gonna attack us in that houses, like what happening with my colleagues Muhammad Abu Hatab, who working with the Palestine TV. He having his dinner with us in the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. After 30 minutes, they bombed his house when he was there, and he returned to the hospital like killed. So this is happening with Muhammad Al-Alul, Mu'min Shrafi, Wa Al-Dahduh, even the journalists who are injured and they was like get a treatment in the hospitals, they also targeting them. So they didn't kill you like just one time, they're killing you like twice sometimes. So it's very hard to making a balance between your family and between your mission, between your job. I remember in the 25th of October, I was covering in some massacre in Deir al-Balah, and I received a message from my sister. She saying, please come to the house, they bombed us. So I catch the phone, I call her, I asked her, are you okay? She said like, yes, we are okay, but they bombed the house, the walls, it's falling above us. I say, okay, go to the hospital, I'm gonna finish my work, and then I come. And why? Because my responsibility, it's not that the small family, like my sister, my brother, it's the big family, like the people who are suffering there. And I was in the hospitals covering like 3 massacres there, and there was like more than 30 people who killed in that massacre. So should I lift like the coverage and go to see my family that injured, or should I continue what I'm doing? So you also uh, living in a conflict every day, in every situation also. When my family forced to leave their houses actually because the military, they became very close to our houses, and the drones and the bullets, it's going inside our houses. I told them, you go to Rafah, and I'm going to continue my coverage here in Khan Yunis. Then we're gonna like uh, meet in that city. So just in Gaza, it's making like a double load or like triple load in the photographer. A lot of times you're supposed to lift your camera just to provide a food for your family, or like to give some people there like a bottle of water, or like to help a child who arrived to the hospital without parents. And it's happened with me like personally, when I found like a girl called Amina Ghannam. Amina, she arrived to the hospital in 23 of January 2024, and she had like very black eyes, and her photo, it became like popular. She was wearing a blue mask with a hoodie, and her eyes was like very black and red. Why? Because the tanks, it's going over their caravans, and there was in this caravan, and there was squeezing all all the night. So when she arrived to the hospital, I asked her, where is your parents? She said, my father who died last night, and my mom, she is living outside of Gaza before the war, so I don't have anyone. So I invite my colleagues, we bring like blankets, we take her to the doctors. So also it's taking you sometimes from the coverage when you supposed to save the life of the people. Um, it's happening like in every day for with us as a journalist. And uh, also when we're going to covering an airstrike, sometimes we arrive before like the civilian defenses and the ambulance. So we found like the people under the rebels who need the help. Always like in photojournalism, we had a conflict between like if you are in a situation, should you take a photo or like you help the people, you help the victims. But there, like always, like we lift our cameras because the people they are like there is no one there like giving a help, and because of the large number of the injured people. I remember in 26th of October in 2023, the first month of genocide, we're going to cover a massacre against Al-Taj area. It was in center of Gaza. Say they bombed by maybe like 15 tons of bombing, and we found like four towers, four big towers. They was like destroying, so they became on the ground. And we arrived there, we found like uh, it was larger than the sensor of the camera, larger than a frame or like a video. We cannot like I remember I couldn't take any frames there because يعني where I supposed to start from any area. And then when we go inside there, we found like a lot of people who are screaming under the rebels. So immediately, like I left my camera, I take off my vest, and then I go under the rubble like just to help the people. Uh, I met a girl there under the rubble. She was 14 years old, and I asked her at that moment, like, how old are you? What you loving? Because she was stuck under like a three of floors. They are like falling on her tiny body, and she was screaming, and there was a fire. It's became next to her. So actually, there was no way to bring her out. I was there just to make her not feel alone, um, just to stay with her until like the people, until like the civilians, defenses came and help her. So in that day, يعني I spent like 10 minutes under the rubbles. Like it was full of smoke, full of dust. And when I go out and خلاص يعني we supposed to leave the area at that time because we need to move from a city to the other. And after month and month of research, I was looking to this girl until I found some of her relative. She gave me a number of her dad. Then I called her dad to asking about Lama, her Lamar. Her name was Lamar, and I asked him, "How is Lamar? How she doing now?" And he says, "Like Lamar, she's died. She killed in like after like 30 minutes when they pull it out from there." So this moment, it's yeah, mentally, we cannot go out of these frames, of these stories, of these people. Like, especially when you know that these people, they are like your people, your family, your neighbors, your colleagues. Uh, so yeah.
Well, thank you, Belal. Can you tell me, given obviously this is continuing tragic number of 250 dead journalists, obviously, plus thousands more civilians that have been killed. Do you feel that the work that you did, your colleagues are continuing to do today, is having the impact that is necessary? And if no, why? Why is it not working? Why is it not helping enough?
And absolutely, the work we did it, and the work still my colleagues they are doing there. They are risking of their lives, and the cost of the photos in Gaza. It's meaning like your life or your family. So, and this is very important, and the impact it's happening. The change is start happening. The awareness of Palestinian cases, the awareness about the real genocide, what's happening there. The people they became know more about it through us actually, and also for the victims. It's very important for us to document each massacre, each massacres, each airstrike, each one who killed there, because they are not numbers. They are like they are souls. They are there is a life. There is a family's erased from like the civil, the system. So it's very important to document these stories of these peoples. And in another side, also, it's very important for us to help like the legal department, the legal organization to make a cases in international court, something like this. Sometimes also يعني you saving a life through your pictures. Like a lot of cases we documented, and when we posted in agencies that we worked on it or on social media, immediately like a lot of people they asking how we can evacuate these cases to get a treatment outside in Gaza. Uh, Also for the missing people in Gaza, and this is like a very important case because more than like 10 or 15,000 they are missing in Gaza since the beginning of war. So we're helping the families sometimes always to يعني they know where is their relative, their the rest of families through our photos, because I remember when the bombing happening, it's like the families it's became like a separate, so no one know where are the rest of his relative. So they became to us and they tell us like, did you see someone like wearing a t-shirt, black t-shirt or like red? And we like start to showing the photos, and a lot of cases they note like he's injured in this hospital or he's unfortunately died. Some people they know their relative was dying and they was burying also after a long time through our photos. So the change it's happening because of the powerful of photo.
Great, well, thank you. Before we get to the Q&A, just as a kind of as a conclusion, you know, from Vietnam to today, photojournalism has shaped how wars are perceived and remembered. Yet as access becomes more controlled and governments refine media strategies, the challenge remains, how do we continue to document the truth when visibility is increasingly restricted? The evolution of war photography is a testament to both the power of the visual storytelling and the ongoing struggle to see and, most importantly, to show what truly happens on the front lines. And here we have 3 visual journalists that are doing just that. So I thank them for participating today, but more importantly, I thank them for their work and what they've done. And so I'd like to now open it up to Q&A. Hopefully we have some interesting questions for the panelists today. So Fiona has a mic. Feel free to raise your hand, and we'll be happy to answer some questions.
Hi there. Thank you. The very powerful, moving talks. Thank you very much. Well, you talk about trust, and trust is obviously fundamental to what you do. One of the things we haven't touched upon, though you did a little bit, Patrick, at the start, was the growth of AI and different sources. I myself have done work whereby I find ordinary, everyday people trust social media more than they trust media outlets because they perceive that social media is unmediated. They don't understand context, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think as we go forward, it's likely that curation is going to become increasingly important. So a few places that people feel they can trust are going to become absolutely essential as we move forward with the growth of AI and untrustworthiness and so on. So my question, sorry, it's a long introduction, is where do you see trust as coming from? Who might be the curators who people will be able to trust going forward?
Patrick? Where will be the places in the future that will be places that people can trust that the work that they're seeing is true? Traditional media, social media, specific organizations?
I have no idea. I think we're going to try to invade the social media. That's the only possibility. Maybe we'll have to show ourselves working, which I hate. I did in Libya. I was filming with a 180-degree camera. We were testing a new way of filming, and I was not used to that because it's so wide. And at one moment, I crossed in the desert because, as Nicole said, it was very dangerous to be on that only road where those guys were brave but very bad fighters, and they kept moving up and down the road where the airplanes knew exactly where they were. I tried to cross through the desert thinking they would not shoot at just one guy, and to go to the front. And I heard some departure of rockets, and I thought we were going to be bombed. There was a few rebels with me, and so I put the camera on my stomach to grab my still camera to take the pictures of the bombing. And I got in the frame because I was not used to that 180 millimeter. And so you see me, the conditions in which we work. And when I show this film, you see the rockets landing and you see my camera. Then when I show that to the young people in the colleges and all that, they say, wow. Because when you see a picture, you just see a 1/50th of a second photo, but you don't see how the guy did it, what he went through to do it, and what he's going through while he's taking it, and the aftermath. So I didn't do it on purpose, but I used that, and that changes everything. So, because then the people say, wow, I mean, it's not that easy, so we must trust you. But, you know, it's the contrary of my ethic, is to show myself doing that. But sometimes some guys, maybe the younger generation, will have to get into the frame to show that we will not take all these risks to tell, lies. And otherwise, the other solution would be to oblige the public to go once in their life on a war story with a reporter.
I think also there's, in addition to that, I think there's several other things that are happening. One, which will probably take at least a generation, is this idea of education in media literacy, to teach people, your children, your grandchildren, and so on, how to absorb content, what's real, what's not. And then we have Adobe as well, who's partnered now with probably every major news organization, as well as the camera manufacturers, Sony, Canon, Apple, Samsung, Fuji, and so on. Something called the Content Authenticity Initiative, CAI. You can Google it. And basically what they're doing is that they're establishing the provenance of digital photography. So now you have cameras, Leica came out with the M11, where it's built in, the provenance is attached to the file, meaning that it's very difficult to change it. Once the image is published, the information will be locked and will follow. And eventually, what will hopefully happen to some degree, there was going to be some sort of system, whether it's a check mark or something, that the New York Times, BBC, The Guardian, Le Monde, etc., will show work, and this work will be transparent. That you as a viewer will be able to see whether the metadata, the caption has been changed, whether or not Photoshop has been done on the photograph, and basically the photographs that you will see in traditional media will be work that has been basically with the check mark, that has been accepted by journalism standards, that this is a legitimate photograph taken at this date, at this place, and so on. But this is in the process, but there are people fighting against this to basically talk about exactly what we're all talking about. How are we not going to get fooled by AI? And it's both, CAI is going to be both for still and for motion. Any other questions?
Thank you for the panel. It's very interesting. I just want to say that I feel that social media and AI are obviously part of the problem, but I feel they are a bit of an easy excuse, because what I think is happening is that it's the far right and the governments that are now on the rise and in power who are targeting the media, and that's the core of the problem. And only by exposing them and speaking about their actions is the way to actually solve the problems we're facing now.
Belal, do you feel now, as obviously you're not in Gaza now, but you're using your work, your art to send this message, do you feel that you're constantly fighting against forces that are trying to stop you from telling the stories?
And of course, especially like when we're talking about when we started the problem from social media, the Meta company or social media in general, always they are against like the journalistic photos, like it's became from Gaza. They are like always making a shadow ban on our accounts. They deleted our accounts sometimes. So this is like it's another word, like we have it, and we need also to talk more about it with like the social media organization, because we are a journalists. We don't have any relation with any political movement. We don't publish also any like of politics content. It's just like the truth. So we post the truth, especially. So in that platforms, sometimes we feel like we don't have our freedom, like or like our space to show it. So now we start like to reduce like our content in social media, and because most of people they watch they are in social media, not on like in the media newspapers or like in the TVs. So it's very important also for us to find a solution in this, and also continue what I'm started on the field there. So now I'm going like I did like a lot of talks around the world, from Chile to South Africa to Europe, about like the photojournalism in Gaza, the attacking of journalists there, the powerful of photography. I did like a lot of exhibitions. I'm working on now another exhibition and a photo book also about to document what I started there, and I met some legal organization. They making like cases in the international court, and they making like in Gaza for hospitals. Started with Al Ma'madani Hospital. So yes, we working as much as we can.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for the work you do, but also the insights today. Maybe a little bit another question, like not about the trust, but how do you go on with like separating your own political values to the work you do as a visual journalist?
Nicole, do you want to take that one?
Sure. It's It's always tricky, of course, because I think a lot of the things that we witness, there is a very clear right and wrong, especially when it comes to war, and the scenarios we come across are usually the people who are the most vulnerable, who are the civilians and children, who don't deserve any of it, no matter what. And that, of course, sometimes does form the basis of your political views. And I think that what's important to know is that, I'm not there to project my political view into the pictures. I do the best job I can to show the context of what's going on within my own limitations of, what I can document that's in front of me. For example, working in Ukraine means that I may never be able to go to Russia to see, the other side. And that has been the case for many recent conflicts, where if you go on one side, you're not necessarily allowed to go to the other side after that. So I am aware that the window through which I see is purely from one side. But within that, I can also kind of have some distance. I think, in some ways, when you spend longer in a place, you become more personally attached to it, and it's harder to not have some, feeling about the political situation that goes above all of that. But that's not my role. And if I do start kind of putting my political opinions and views into the work that I do, whether that's a caption or a picture, or trying to kind of instill that into my images, then I'm not doing my job, and that actually erodes the trust in photographers even further.
Thank you. There's another question.
Thanks very much for this great discussion. And Patrick, I had a question. If there was any one time in your long history of covering conflicts where the role of the journalist, that you really saw it start to change, that it became part of the chessboard rather than just the observer, rather than documenting, and things kind of happened around the journalist as they were there, but then they became pieces that could either kidnapping, manipulation, imprisonment. If there was one particular event or conflict that you were covering where you kind of, it felt different to you.
I don't understand the question.
That's okay, I don't either, no. Just that your role as a journalist, seemingly as an outside observer, changed, and you were part of it now, that journalists became pieces that one side could kidnap to sell up the chain or use to manipulate one side or another. That you were no longer the neutral observer.
Like in Lebanon, maybe when Terry Anderson was kidnapped.
Yeah,
like,
Lebanon is an example.
Change.
I don't think I was ever neutral. I mean, my pictures are, but my heart and the way I feel, of course, is, but that's personal. I mean, we're trying to work on facts. We listen to the people, we take pictures of the people.
No,
now that the armies
Patrick,
and
he's
the
asking
government...
more about the role of the journalist, not specifically you, but like, did the role of the photographer or the writer start to change during one conflict? People are more aware of the role of the messenger? Or?
Well, I mean, the governments and the armies, are taking us in account when they make plans for fighting. We are part of the plan. It wasn't, well, it was in the same way in Vietnam. It was free because the Americans were sure they were right. And they would call us to, I mean, they even called the press for the massacre of My Lai. It's the American army that took the photographers there and showed us the dead bodies of the civilians that had been massacred by Kelly, that lieutenant. It's the army that gave us the news. It would never happen today. So everybody changed with the Vietnam War. It was very easy to work. You could just go on a helicopter and do everything. And they suddenly realized on both sides that the power of the press, and now we're part of the plans. Every time there's like there was the Iraq war, there was a pool, a press pool. There was a selection of journalists that were working with the Americans. There was a few photographers that refused the pool. They created a group called FTB, Fuck the Pool. So they were working on their own, but of course they were in more danger because they were not with the army. They had quite a few casualties on that side. So it's obvious that sometimes we must think, why am I allowed to go there? We know why we're not allowed, because they don't want us to see. I mean, we can't go to Gaza. We're trying. I tried several times. And we know why they don't want us in Gaza. But imagine if suddenly the Israeli army would say, go there. We would go there, but then we have to think, why are they letting me go there? What use am I to them, you know? So it's very complicated, because you know you're a tool for everybody. I mean, the Palestinians are very good at using the press. They always tell us to come, and the Israelis are not that good, because they're scared of the press. But every time you work with a group, you're embedded. I mean, I don't know why this term suddenly appeared, because it's always been embedded. I mean, when you're with the Afghans and when you're with Massoud fighting the Taliban, you're sleeping with the fighters, you're fighting with the fighters, you're working, eating with them, and every time you're embedded. And of course, if they let you work, it's because they think you're going to be useful for them. So I don't think that really changed. I mean, we've always been part of the plan. But it doesn't really matter, because as you said earlier, Nicole, you have photographers on the Russian side, you have photographers on the Ukrainian side. In Salvador, you had photographers with the rebels and photographers with the government. So the photos from both sides will arrive at the magazine and newspaper. And it's the chief editor that's going to decide the balance between the two. And then you have right-wing newspapers and left-wing newspapers. And then at the end, it's up to you. Buy the left and the right, and then maybe you'll have half the truth. You know, we can only do what we can do, you know, but we know, we're not stupid. We know that if the Ukrainians will let us go there, it's because it's good things happening there, and it's going to be harder to work on the front line when they're losing ground. And after you have different people, like a simple soldier, a commander I work with, he says, I want you to tell the story of me and my men. I don't care what the government thinks. So then it gets individual, and that's why you have to stay long on stories, because you get to get friends. But then you're losing your ability to have the distance, because you become friends with the guys. You know, it's complicated. It's not an easy way to work. I will not pretend that we are impartial. That's bullshit. I mean, but it's up to you to find the truth. We're just proposing. You find your truth in the middle of that. Everybody has his own truth.
I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Belal. And thank you, Nicole, for joining us. And thank you all for being here.